Welcome to the 3030 Health Podcast. The following discussion is for education and entertainment. It is not intended to diagnose or treat disease. Please do not apply any of this information without first discussing it with your doctor. Here is your host, Dr. Ruiz.
Hello everyone, my guest today is Shawna Curry. Shawna has made her mark in the health and wellness space as an Amazon best-selling author, public speaker, and with her personalized health coaching. Her company, Your Lifestyle Strategy, has been dedicated to total health solutions on all aspects of healthy living, including fitness, sleep, nutrition, self-help, and overall lifestyle strategies. As always, I want to thank you so much for your continued support. If you haven't, I would encourage you to leave an iTunes review. It really makes a difference. Also, make sure to follow me on Instagram. My handle is 3030strong. I hope you enjoy the interview. Hello everyone, this is Dr. Ruiz. So I got my license today and I can officially call myself Dr. Ruiz. And it's pretty crazy because a couple of hours ago I was not Dr. Ruiz, I was just Guillermo. And now I'm Dr. Ruiz. The episode today is super cool. I met Shawna Curry at the Ancestral Health Symposium back in, was it September?
It was, yes, it was September.
Yeah, and we totally clicked. You know, we had a little group of people that we are super clicky, and we were just hanging out during the whole conference, and we learned so much, and we had so much fun. We went to dinner a couple of times, and I was like, I need to have Shawna over on the podcast because she has such a cool story and a book that we're gonna get to, but. Before we start, Shawna, why don't you tell my listeners your hero story? How did you end up in this space?
Yeah, so my story kind of has two parallel roads. I've got my personal story and then my professional story. So we'll get the boring professional story out of the way right away. Basically, I have a degree in kinesiology. I spent 10 years using that degree as a personal trainer, a triathlon coach, teaching fitness classes, working as a kinesiologist in physio clinics, giving exercises to people for their rehab. And then I sort of got to a space where I felt like I wanted to grow a little bit more, to learn more information. I started doing more public speaking, presentations, writing, things like that. And I got to this point where when I would do presentations, people would ask me, what my credentials were, and I would tell them all this experience and all these certifications that I had. And it was like my experience wasn't credible enough because they would always say, "Oh, are you a nurse?" And I was like, "Well, no, but I have all these other things." And so it got me thinking that if I wanted to be more credible and I wanted to take that next step and expand my ability to do more things, maybe there is something to this nursing stuff. So went back to school, took my nursing degree. I'm a registered nurse now as well. And so I've been in the health space for about 16 years. As a nurse, I've worked on a whole bunch of different types of nursing units. Acute neurology is sort of where I've specialized, but I've also really liked the preventive, proactive health. So I've done a lot of community nursing and teaching people about nutrition and diet and things like that. And then what sort of got me interested in that area was more my personal story. So I grew up as a pretty healthy kid. I didn't have a lot of stuff going on health-wise, but they knew right from when I was about 3 years old that I was going to have jaw problems. And they could tell that I had this overbite that was just getting bigger each year. By the time I was just about 18, I was able to stick my thumb sideways between my top jaw and my bottom jaw. And because of that big difference in there, I had a lot of clicking, a lot of locking, tons of jaw pain, barely able to eat solid food at 17 years old. And so I knew something had to change. And so we investigated a whole bunch of different options. And at the time, surgery was the best option. So I went through this massive surgery. It was 8 hours long. I looked like I weighed about 300 pounds after because I was so swollen. Then because of all the work that went on, I basically ended up with a ton of sinus infections. And I was on antibiotics for about 6 months straight. I would just kind of take one course after another. And in your world, you know what that does to your gut, to your whole system. It basically just cleans everything out. And that's when my health really started to change. And I started to have all kinds of weird stuff that young people don't have. So things like staph infections, fungal infections. I had gout. And I remember even just the sheets barely even being able to touch my toes because it was so painful. And really what 18-year-old has gout? I had shingles that happened 3 summers in a row, and I've now had it 4 times in my lifetime. And shingles again shouldn't be something that you have repeatedly, and yet at such an early age, I had it so frequently. And for me, it was on my face, and so very made me super self conscious.
And super dangerous because shingles, that virus follows your dermatomes, and if it's right on your trigeminal nerve, it can affect your eyesight. So it's kind of dangerous when you get it. Usually it presents on the side of your body, but if facial shingles are really really dangerous.
Yes, and so monitored very closely for one of those flares, and on top of that, I was super active, so doing all these sports, and I wasn't able to be consistent in my activities because I kept getting this weird shin pain, and literally 10 years to get diagnosed with chronic compartment syndrome in both of my shins, and ended up having to have surgery for that to relieve that, so that I was able to walk again. I could, when it was at its worst, I could barely walk from my garage to my house. So I know what it's like to be injured and to be in pain and to feel broken and to have this horrible mess of health. I wasn't sleeping. I felt depressed. Like my life just was kind of in shambles. And so essentially for me, what got me down the road of health and interested in that road was being able to reclaim my health and say, in my early 20s, that just wasn't cutting it anymore. It wasn't the kind of life that I wanted to live. And I felt old and I felt tired and I felt broken. And I thought, if I feel this bad when I'm 20, how am I going to feel down the road when I'm 50 or 70? And I just couldn't imagine that future. And so something had to change. And so for me, it was exploring other types of healthcare, things like naturopaths and homeopaths, and changing my diet. And, it was a shock for me to know that your diet can have such an impact on your health just based on making some simple changes.
So many things to touch on, but it seems to me that a lot of the people in this space, start with some sort of like health journey. Like, for example, I know Chris Kresser is really open about having, an amoeba infection, and when he was traveling the world, no one knew how to treat it, and then he had to heal himself. Uh, Rob Wolf, with his IBS problems, Dr. Ruscio, another gut infection, and sometimes we have to rely on ourselves in order to actually be your own patient advocate. I love to say that you do not have to be a doctor to be a healer. In fact, not all doctors are healers, and it starts with like food and good habits and all of this cool stuff that we can do without a prescription pad. And you can be a mom and heal the whole house, because you're in control of the kitchen, and that's health right there. You can be an acupuncturist, you can be a nurse, you can be a yoga instructor, a health coach. So many ways to become a true healer. What would you tell people out there? And this is something that on Facebook you see a lot, or in social media. They are so knowledgeable about health conditions and about habits, and they have it in their head that they want to jump into the scene and change the world. What words of encouragement would you give them? Because it's high risk and high reward, and they might not want to leave their old jobs to start school or get a certification or whatever. What's your words of advice for those people on the fence that want to take that jump and become true healers?
Yeah, and it's definitely a scary place, and I still kind of grab onto that security net of, well, I'm a nurse and I can work as a nurse, and so even for me in my space, it's easy to say, well, if I'm not successful, I can always be a nurse, and so I think there's a balance for people in that you need to look out for your own security. So a lot of people just can't quit their jobs and say, I'm going to start up a health practice and I'm going to be really successful and it's going to happen overnight. it's realizing that it does take time to build credibility, to build up your clientele, to build up that niche, and to be able to be truly successful at it. So for sure, there should be some type of transition time. I think there's a time where you need to let go of that safety net and sort of sink or swim, and you got to jump in and get in there and do it. But there is so much need for people to help in this space that I don't think we can actually get too many people in this space helping others. So if you're on the fence and you're thinking, do I really want to make a difference? I'm, not sure what I want to do. I'm not sure how I want to get in there. I think it's really important to realize that as long as you have something that makes you different, that makes you special, that makes you unique, that's a little bit different from the other people that are in your area, that are in, your wherever you are, is that you've got something that's special, and each of us brings our own unique qualities and our own way of looking at things. And so I think it's really important to say, if you have a dream and you want to help people, jump in there with both feet and make a difference. Because when we look at the world every year, our rates of chronic disease are going up. We're getting more diabetes, more cholesterol, more weight gain. The numbers of people that are overweight and obese have skyrocketed. And we have all these programs, and it's still an issue. So what that tells me is that there is such a need for more people and more programs out there to make a difference, and it's thinking everyone has a different perspective. So if you hit 50 people and I hit 50 people and someone else hits 50 people, think of the difference and the ripple effect that can make. And, and if I'm able to inspire other people to action, that, like, to me, that's really how we make a difference in the world, and how we make this a healthier planet is by inspiring others to also inspire others, to also inspire others, and to continue that forward momentum, because things are not going so well in the world of health right now, and our healthcare systems cannot sustain the pace that the burden that we're putting on them, and we need to look at things a little bit differently.
And on top of that, there are so many aspects to health, and there's so many different, like you said, niches or silos. For example, I'm a doctor and I see patients, and I love talking about paleo. And that's why I have a blog and a website, and I'm talking to people in the space. And I like to talk about, to food scientists, and I like to talk to people that have nutritional expertise, to give all this information away for free. You go out there, you try it, and if it doesn't work, or there are underlying causes for disease in your life, your hormones, your maybe you have a bacterial infection or a gut infection, like brucellosis or the crescers or the wolves, I want to help you heal you. I decided that I wanted to go into this into this license because I wanted to be able to use pharmaceutical agents. I wanted to be able to use botanicals. I wanted to be able to do injection therapy, IVs, all of that cool stuff that I can do as a naturopath. But I don't want anyone to come see me that has 10 pounds to lose, because they're wasting their money. We need nutritionists. We need health coaches that can help you, zoom in that aspect of your life that needs help. We need yoga instructors, and we need, people that teach you how to cook a healthy meal. Because if someone comes to, no one's going to spend their money and their time or fly to Arizona to see me because they don't know what to put on the lunch bag for their son. So there are so many things that you can do within the paleo community to help. Or you can become a scientist and be the next Dan Party or the next Stefan Gayane. There are so many things that you can do within this health space. So we need you, and this is like a call of action, a call of arms. So if you're listening, if you're listening and you need that last push, send me an email. I'll try to help you as much as I can. Like people have helped me, and keep educating yourself, and let's change the world. But, okay, so let me get off of that soapbox. But
I love it.
Another thing, are you familiar with the work of Mike Mew?
No.
So,
Tell me more.
AHS 2012, I think. AHS 2012. So he did a presentation on our jaws, and we're so familiar with the work of Weston A. Price, and how vitamin K, and well, Mike Mew took it to a different level, and he started talking about how we eat so many soft foods, and when we are eating all these soft foods, our jaw muscles are underdeveloped, and that's when we start developing narrow jaws or overbites and all of these crazy things that you see in people. And if you ever go on Google and you do juice fast for 60 days or whatever, and the before and afters, if you look at those people's jaws, they become narrower. And it makes total sense because those masseters, those muscles in the mouth become like almost atrophied because you're not using them, you're not chewing. So he has a different way of doing orthodontics, where instead of doing your braces or whatever, he does a different style where he helps you expand your jaw, which is a more natural way of fixing your bite. And it's kind of crazy and really, really interesting. But if you think about it, what are we feeding our kids? So you have your chicken nuggets and your fries, all these like really soft foods, and we evolved getting meat out of bones and cracking open nuts, and now we have this idea that eating this pre-chewed juices or this pre-chewed things somehow are cleansing or whatever, and they might be, but maybe we haven't evolved to be eating this pre-processed foods, and maybe we need a little bit of more texture in our meats.
Absolutely. I don't think any meat was harmed in the making of a chicken nugget.
Yeah, but that's another evolutionary perspective on orthodontics. Did you speaking of chronic infections, and you had a chronic sinus infection. Are you familiar with Marcon's multiple antibiotic resistant coagulase negative staphylococci?
You probably know way more about that than I do, but I know a little bit.
A couple of years ago, Kresser had a really cool article on using xylitol spray.
Oh, I saw that one, yes.
So xylitol helps break down biofilm. So for anyone out there that doesn't know what biofilm does, whenever bacteria feel threatened from antibiotics or anything like that, they go into biofilm formation. And when they go into biofilm, they cannot be reached by the antibiotic. So they are protecting themselves from the antibiotic. And when you treat with the antibiotic, you kill 90% of the bacteria, and then like 10 or 1% gets left behind. And once you have a nice environment, the bacteria starts growing again. So then you go to your second round of antibiotics, and then your third round of antibiotics, and then your fourth round. Where if you were using something like a xylitol spray to break down the biofilm and then treating, then you might not need so many courses of antibiotics. And it's things like that, these little strategies that could be saving people of problems down the line, like gut dysbiosis or yeast infections or urinary tract infections, or in the case of Cipro, torn tendons. And this information needs to be shared with as many people in order to help them.
Absolutely. And it's hard because that type of information isn't always being shared in the traditional medical office where it could be beneficial, because we're still kind of stuck in whatever traditional methods that we have. And there, at least in Canada, there isn't consistently an integration between sort of the two practices between, the Eastern and Western styles of medicine. They're very separated. There are some clinics that are collaborative and integrative in terms of different styles and approaches, but you sort of have to pick and choose between what style of medicine you want to follow, and you sort of get one style or the other. It's very difficult to have them both together.
If you were to, break down the healthcare system and you were tasked with the task of creating the perfect integrative health clinic. What would it look like?
Ooh, that would be a fun task. I think it'd be very overwhelming, but I think really what we need to do is to have more open-mindedness in terms of the collaborative nature of the practices. When I was in nursing school, I remember watching this video, and it was from China and the hospitals there. And in the hospital, they would have the doctor that would do the traditional medicine. They would have the doctor that would do the acupuncture. They would have the doctor that would do the herbals, and they worked as a team and collaboratively worked with the patient while someone else would help with some massage or lymph drainage. And it was this combined approach that seemed to really benefit their patients there. And I think what a wonderful way to look at it, in that I think there's a time and a place for each of these different modalities. And so I think, I mean, I still work on an acute unit where we need traditional medicine. We need hospitals. We need machines to do things for people that we can't just do with an herbal or a tincture or a massage or an acupuncture. But I think at the same time, if we could have these patients that are also hooked up to machines, and now we're giving them vitamin D because they're not getting any when they're in the hospital. We're giving them acupuncture and other modalities to help relieve their stress and to help balance their systems. And we're using less narcotics because the other modalities we're using give them pain relief. And so then your patient is able to ambulate quicker. They're able to decrease chances of pneumonia quicker because they're collaboratively working together with these approaches. And I think, carrying that through the line. So hospital obviously is where we are when we're the sickest, when we're the most acute. But what happens on that more day-to-day basis when we go to our family doctors and we need something for that sniffle that we've had? I know a lot of clinics get frustrated because patients will come in, be like, I've had a cough for 3 days, or I've had a sore throat for 4 days. And antibiotics are not the solution, but that's what we've sort of taught people is the answer, is that, okay, you've had something that makes you sick, let's give you antibiotics. And now we're almost like clawing back the antibiotics because of all the antibiotic resistance that's out there, and trying to re-educate people that antibiotics are not necessarily the solution. In some cases, yes, they're needed, but I feel, well, and I know that we definitely use them incorrectly. We use them too much. We use the wrong kind. And then people will get prescriptions for antibiotics and they'll only take half of it, or they'll keep, they'll keep it for other times and then wonder why it's not working or why they need more and more each time they come in, and I've dealt with patients that are like, oh yeah, I just took these antibiotics that I had laying around home. And okay, well, what antibiotic was that? And it was the completely wrong antibiotic for the type of infection that they had. And I think this misunderstanding rather about the use of antibiotics, and I don't think people realize there's different classes of antibiotics for different classes of bacteria that we want to treat. And so it's sort of re-educating the whole system. And if we were to create this ideal system, we would have collaborative practices, and I mean a shared EMR that literally can transfer all over the world. And in some ways I think would be really great, to be able to track your electronic records wherever you go. That doesn't exist at this point, and how we would create a worldwide system, I have no idea. But if someone listening is qualified to do that, that would be amazing. If we could even get countries all on one system, I don't know how many electronic records there are in the States between all the hospitals and clinics. And I'm sure, I mean, Canada is the same in that we have so many systems. And I think being able to have this more, have better access to information of, what options have we tried with this patient? Have we tried stretching? Have we tried exercise? Have we tried diet? Have we tried all these lifestyle measures? And that's a big piece of what I talk about, is going back to the basics, is that there's so much information out there right now. And we know our clients, our patients are so overeducated in terms of the information that's out there about their health condition. Like, you can literally go online, you can self-diagnose almost anything thanks to Dr. Google. And while it's wonderful that we have all this information, I think sometimes we forget the basics. We forget to go back to the essentials of what health is built on, that solid foundation. And I talk about this as pillars of health, but focusing on things like your sleep, your nutrition, your exercise, what your mental health or your mood and energy are like, focusing on your medical conditions, your digestion, and your lifestyle factors. And when we can look at all of those and balance them out, I think that's what an ideal medical system would be, is focusing on those things. And when we have all of those in balance and have better control over them, people are just healthier. Even if you just do a little bit in each of those areas, you're able to control a lot of medical conditions with just a couple simple tweaks here and there on all of those lifestyle factors.
Okay, so we're entering cold season, and you just opened Pandora's box. So for anyone out there that has, or what do you do for yourself if you feel like a cold coming around, and like what are some of your strategies that you employ with yourself?
Yeah, so I definitely do a bunch of things. I don't get sick super often. So yes, there's usually like a little bit of a tickle here and there. And when I feel that little, like I'll kind of get a little scratchiness in my throat or just feel a little stuffed up for a couple of days. And so as soon as stuff starts coming on, I definitely work on what is my nutrition and thinking about the basics. And so even nutritionally, making sure I don't eat a lot of sugar. Occasionally it sneaks into my diet, but making sure there's zero sugar in my diet, that is a big one. I definitely increase my greens. And so any kind of veggies that I've got around the house, depending if it's spring, summer, I usually have a lot in my garden. Through the winter, I've got it frozen. So I'll pull a giant bag of kale or Swiss chard out of the freezer. And I make, my husband doesn't call them smoothies. They're called sludgies because there's so much green in them that they, yeah, they're definitely sludgerific. I'll usually throw a little bit of berries in there, but I'll increase my greens, chuck a whole bunch in there, usually a big piece of ginger as well. Another go-to that I have is my ginger tea, and I think Chris Kresser actually talked about this. I think that's
Ginger,
where I
lemon, and
originally,
cayenne pepper.
yes.
Yeah.
And so I don't have a juicer, but I have a Vitamix, and so it's one of those blenders that liquefies everything. So I put in a giant chunk of ginger, the whole thing goes in there, take the lemon, I just make sure I get the seeds out, but basically a whole lemon goes in there, liquefy all of that. I throw in a ton of cayenne pepper, almost unpalatable, and a good scoop of honey just to try to balance it out. And I actually drink it really concentrated. I know Chris Kresser was saying, oh, just dilute it and then you've got a liter or two. But I think then I have a liter or two of this nasty sludge that I have to drink. If I keep it more concentrated, then I have less to get through. It's only about a cup or two. And then I drink a ton of water besides that, because now for every sip of my sludge I drink, I almost have to drink another glass of water to get the taste out of my mouth. But that really does a good job of boosting my immune system.
It's so funny when you go to the doctor and you're sitting there and they have 5 minutes and you have an upper respiratory infection that is likely viral. The problem is that retrovirals or antivirals are super nasty on the body because viruses are just basically pieces of RNA or DNA. There's still discussion and big debates over are they even alive. We can't classify them as being alive or not. We're not sure. Because they depend on cells in order to reproduce. And when we attack them, we're basically attacking DNA. And guess what? We have DNA. So that's where you start losing your hair or, they're having horrible nausea, diarrhea. And, so we cannot prescribe antivirals lightly. But we can prescribe antibacterials, antibiotics. So they are, in this box, and that's the only thing they have. If I have a patient come into my office with an acute URI, there's so many things that I can do. I can prescribe an IV with vitamin C, with glutathione, with a couple of B vitamins, things that are going to go into your bloodstream and help you ramp up your immune system. I can do acupuncture. It's going to help you clear the pathway and maybe help you drain. We have different supplements like N-acetylcysteine that thins out mucus and helps you. It's a super good expectorant. And recently, I published an ebook with like top supplements for your natural medicine cabinet for a cough. The best thing you can do for a cough is you take honey and you take instant coffee, and you make like this mixture of instant coffee and honey, and you can sip on that. In the study that we cited, it's a human study, double-blind placebo, more effective than prednisone. And this is coffee and honey. And so we have so many alternatives to taking that antibiotic that is not going to do anything. It's probably not going to shorten your symptoms of cold. You're going to be upset because the doctor only spent 5 minutes with you, and but we have so many options. And I think that a lot of times we get caught in this analysis paralysis where because someone told you that's what you do. You see them for 5 minutes, you listen to their lungs, you might order an x-ray, and come back in 3 days, and I'll give you a Z-Pack if you don't get better. And that's it. You don't have any other options. And even considering going into the complementary medicine, even considering, stepping out a little bit, it's like heresy. But there are so many options, that we can have. And I think that's the beauty of complementary medicine. When we can take the best of Western medicine, antibiotics have saved millions of lives, and we can take the best of traditional medicine and all these, well-researched modalities, and combine them and make a synergistic approach to healthcare that works for things like acute URIs, dysbiosis, and then higher level things like Lyme disease, and then ameliorating the effects of cancer treatments. So it is just so powerful, and we're not taking advantage of it.
No, not at all. And think of how wonderful that would be if we could have that type of a combined system where, all of that is the norm, and that is what's almost expected of care. And even to make it even better is if we could have that so that it's free for anyone that needs it, instead of this fee for service. And I mean, there's lots of different health models, and no healthcare is free. And that's sort of this false illusion, is that we think that, in Canada especially, we think, oh, we don't pay for healthcare, but we do. It just comes out of a different pile. We may not pay out of pocket, but that comes out of our taxes, or that comes from other areas that, we've paid into. And so indirectly, we still pay for that. And that takes away from our budget to spend on other things in the system that could make people healthier, and things like increasing education funding. And we think when we know that when people are more educated, they're healthier because they're able to make better choices. They've got higher levels of awareness. We see there's tons of studies showing that as your education goes up, as you gain more years, that your risk of getting involved in unhealthy lifestyle choices goes down. And so we know if you drop out of school at a very early age, you're going to be set up for a lifetime of health issues. And so even just the impact of, if we could have a better healthcare system to ease the burden so money can be diverted into other places, and then that positively affects the whole system, and everything just spirals in this upward direction instead of this slow, sad decline that everything keeps getting cut and cut and cut because costs keep going up everywhere.
And cost keeps going up because we have created this reactionary system. We have bastardized the word prevention.
Mm-hmm.
In this day and age, prevention is using a statin to prevent heart disease in the future. And that makes no sense to me, because it's like, you have a parking lot full of nails, and the way to prevent having a nail puncture in your tire is you buy an extra set of wheels and you keep them in your garage. You know, it's like,
I
oh,
love that.
yeah, of course it's more expensive. Why don't you just grab a broom and clean it? You know, and that's what we need to do. Clean your diet, you know, clean your sleep, clean your nutrition. Again, you know, we don't have a perfect system, and it can get super confusing. So let's say your aunt calls you and she says, "Hey, Shauna, I want to start losing weight, or I got, you know, X disease or anything, you know, like that." I wish that I could say, "Oh, just go to go to any complementary practitioner." I would love to say that, but in reality, we can't say that. We have to be very judicious with our recommendations. What do you look for in in an integrative practitioner? What are some of, like, what's the litmus test that you use in order to say, you know, this guy is legit or this guy is full of shit?
I think honestly results are a big piece of what I look for. And I mean it's challenging when a new practitioner is coming out because they don't have the experience and they don't have the clientele to show the results. But you're right, is there are so many practitioners out there and some are getting really good results and some are not. Now, but results on their own are not always enough. So if you take just the simple idea of weight loss, well, I mean, just about anyone out there can help you lose weight.
Yeah,
There's
just
lots
stop
of
eating.
there's lots of unhealthy programs out there that put people on these 500-calorie diets, and I'm going to give you some hormonal injections along the way, and oh look, surprisingly, you're losing weight at an unhealthy rate of 5 to 10 pounds per week that is not sustainable, not achievable. And then we wonder why when our clients stop doing these crazy diets, they gain it all back and then some. So results on their own are not necessarily just the litmus test, but the results are, do you get the results, and then are the results sustained after the program? Because that's the key, is that we don't want people just going out there and losing weight and then gaining it all back 6 months later or a year later because the program wasn't a healthy program. You know, it's making sure that we're teaching patients that, you know, normal weight loss or average weight loss is 2 pounds per week. But from my experience, you know, especially as a personal trainer and especially for women, 2 pounds per week is a lot of weight to lose on a consistent basis. You know, I find with especially menopausal women, we're looking at closer to half a pound or a pound a week, not necessarily this higher level. And so it's retraining our clients of what their expectations are out of the program. Other things that I would look for in a litmus test is the credibility and where are they getting their information from? Do they have some type of a certification? So we talked about this earlier in the podcast. Is like, yes, we want more people out there helping to do, you know, all kinds of health stuff. So whether you want to be a massage therapist, you want to be a dietitian, you want to be a doctor, but it's making sure that you are getting the best credentials for what you want to do in your area. And again, there's a whole spectrum of different types of courses and different types of programs, and some are just better than other programs. And so for me, credibility is a huge piece of what I look for in a professional.
And additionally, you know, let's say you have, you know, you have a badass acupuncturist or a badass personal trainer. Well, make sure that the personal trainer, or, you know, or your health practitioner is staying well within their scope of practice. You know,
Absolutely.
like, for example, I will not do surgery, you know, and because I don't have the training to do, you know, to perform open heart surgery or anything like that. That's not within my scope.
But
And
you're a doctor.
yeah, and the same, you know. So as long as, you know, like, your practitioner is well within their scope of practice and they're doing what they're trained, and know their limitations and know when to refer out, that's also super important.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love how you touched about staying within your scope of practice because each profession will have their own regulatory body to say this is what you are allowed to do as a nurse or as a doctor or as a massage therapist. And it's making sure that within your scope that you are aware of what your limitations are. And I mean, I refer people all the time because while as a nurse I can give dietary recommendations, I can't tell you that you need this many milligrams of vitamin A per day and you need this many, you know, ounces of this per day. That's not within my scope. That's where a dietitian would come in. but I can tell you don't eat processed food or don't, eat maybe, work on increasing vegetables because it doesn't sound like you have very much in your diet. And so it's just being really aware of what your limitations are and what your scope is, and making sure that you're being safe and that I think you're being a better practitioner by referring to other people who specialize in the areas that you're not in, because none of us know everything. I think the more that I learn about health, the more I know that I don't know. And I'm sure you're in the same boat, is that there's
100%.
yeah, there's so much information out there. Is there's no way for any one practitioner, I don't care who you are, what your practice is, you cannot know everything about everything. It just isn't possible.
And then I'm gonna add one more thing. All of it within an evolutionary perspective. Making sure that the way they're practicing, the reason they're doing a procedure or they're ordering an exam has some sort of like evolutionary basis. And that's like, that's a scientific basis within that evolutionary basis. So it's like one more level, not just double blind placebo control, but double blind placebo controlled within an evolutionary perspective. Because once you start removing mismatches, once you start removing obstacles to health, that's when you achieve true cure. We were talking a little bit about your 7 pillars before we started the conversation. And one of the pillars is medical conditions. What do you mean by that?
So I explain health in the sense of a tabletop. So you've got your 4 fundamental pillars of health. That's your sleep, your nutrition, your exercise, and your mental health. Now, on their own, those pillars are basically just sticks. They need something to tie them together to make them a table. And that's your digestion. Your digestion interrelates with each of those 4 pillars. And then what happens is you've got your medical conditions and your lifestyle factors that sit on top of the table and sort of lean more to one side or the other if one of your table legs are weak or if your tabletop is weak. So it's sort of this interactive system where you can't just exist with one piece or with another piece. They all sort of interrelate. So in terms of medical conditions, that is 2 things. So one, it's the conditions that you've been diagnosed with or are avoiding being diagnosed with. So for example, if you've got diabetes or you've got hypertension, you've got cholesterol issues, all these different things that could exist. The second part of it is that not everyone has an existing medical condition. So I would say at this point right now in my life, I don't have a medical condition. But for me, what that pillar would represent is all the possibilities of other the things that could come up. So, what is my family history? Are my parents diabetic? Do they have high cholesterol? Do they have, do they have osteoporosis? Any existing conditions that they may have passed on to me in my genetics? I'm more predisposed to those. So my medical conditions pillar, I may not have stuff going on right now, but what could happen in the future if I'm more predisposed to having something because of what that genetic tendency is. And I know a lot of people will refer to genetics sort of as the light switch ideas. You've got your genetics there, but it's your epigenetic factors, all those other lifestyle factors, the table legs, if you will, the tabletop, if you will, that turn that switch on and off to control, to say, just because you have genes for a condition doesn't mean that you have to get it. So just because maybe both my parents had diabetes and maybe my aunts and uncles and grandma had it, doesn't mean that I am 100% guaranteed that I will become diabetic if I have all these other healthy preventive lifestyle factors. So I exercise and I eat really good and I do stress management and I sleep really well. I may not get diabetes. It may have just been that everyone else in my family was really overweight, super inactive, and didn't have other healthy habits. And so just because you have the genetics for something doesn't mean that you for sure will get it. So that medical conditions pillar is looking at it from a couple of different angles.
It's super fascinating that there's I see patients, and even through school when I was at the clinic, and you would see the cholesterol level around 240s, or they come in and and they don't want to get their blood pressure because it's high, and they say, oh, it's genetic.
Or it's white coat syndrome.
Or white coat syndrome, yeah. So it's kind of, I like to explain that, okay, so cool, it's genetic, but that doesn't mean that that epigenetics is going to be manifested on you. Maybe there is something that we can do in order to change that cholesterol, because your genetics are not a sentence. Um, Specifically when it comes to hypercholesterolemia, when it, like, true hypercholesterolemia, you're talking about uh, the levels of cholesterol in the 400s, in the even the 500s, and in really bad cases, those people with genetic predisposition to high cholesterol, they die at an early age. When you have someone that is like in the 220s, 240s, maybe there's some hormonal imbalance. Your thyroid is so important for your cholesterol activity. Your diet, I was just listening to a podcast with Master John Stephen Guinea, talking about saturated fats and how it affects your blood lipids. So there are interventions that we can take action on to prevent that from showing up. And then things like genetic testing. Okay, so genetic testing is super interesting, and getting your 23andMe in having that report analyzed by Genetic Genie or Prometheus. You get such cool information, but that doesn't mean that the outcome of that information is going to change dramatically. It's going to change your life dramatically. What do I mean by that? A lot of these specialty tests are really cool thought experiments, but they're not really going to change what you're going to do. Like, let's say someone comes in with maybe a higher predisposition for hypercholesterolemia, or a higher predisposition to Alzheimer's, or a higher predisposition to other things like BRCA, or things like that. My answer is going to be, you need to sleep, you need to have good nutrition, you need to have good exercise habits, you need to have good mental health. So it's always going to go back to those 7 pillars. So the outcomes of those expensive tests sometimes, although super interesting, are not going to change the way you treat that patient.
So yes, there is some value in some of the tests that are out there, but genetic testing is so detailed, and there's really, in terms of how practitioners use that information, there's so much that we still don't know about that genetic testing, that it's great, and I think it's really interesting to learn what's going on inside your body, but the practical application of it isn't quite there, especially when we look at the number of genes that we are testing, and to truly use that information to the best of our abilities. Like, our knowledge in terms of how to use that just isn't there yet.
And within the functional medicine, world, there's genetic testing, and there is like looking at your gut biome, and that information is super interesting. But unfortunately, we still haven't figured out how to use it. So, in regardless of the results, if you have a lot of bad bacteria, the gold standard for testing that would be a stool culture, a microscopic analysis of your stool. And that's going to give us, okay, this is the bacteria that is out of balance. Let's prescribe the right thing, whether it's a natural antimicrobial or an actual antibiotic, and to eliminate it. That gut biome analysis, it's giving you a bunch of cool information, but at this point in time, we really don't have the studies or the sample sizes or the experience even to have it being useful for the treatment. So, like with a microbiome analysis, what I can say is, okay, yeah, so let's add some prebiotics to your diet, and let's add a nice good probiotic, and let's eat, some fiber if you don't have SIBO. And guess what? If they hadn't brought that analysis in, I would have said the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you're right, is that it still goes back down to it doesn't matter what the testing tells you. If you're not sleeping, if you're not eating good, if you're not doing some exercise, none of that matters. And so it really is coming back to those basics and just really focusing on what are your pillars and what are you able to influence and change in your own life. While things like the genetic testing are great for, hey, I want to know more about stuff, whatever your stuff is, but it doesn't matter what's going on with that picture. Is that if you aren't focusing on your sleep, if you're really stressed out, there's a lot going on. We can throw all the herbals and microbials and all those things at it. If those fundamentals aren't there, if your tabletop is falling over, it's making sure that we always go back to those fundamentals, always go back to those basics, regardless of what the testing says, and making sure that we've got a solid foundation so that if you choose to do testing and choose to use that information, then you're building that on top of a solid foundation of health.
And that's not to say that all testing, like we shouldn't test anything. We have really good data on like TSH for your thyroid. We have really good data in different markers for different things. Like for example, cholesterol, and making sure that cholesterol is within an acceptable normal range, especially if you start looking at the fractions of cholesterol that are more damaging to your vessels, and making sure your VLDL stays low and your triglycerides are low, or like for example, as simple as a urinalysis, that you don't have leukocytes or nitrates, and you're not spilling sugar or protein into your urine, and that your kidneys are working well, and that your liver is working well. Those are very useful and very necessary lab tests. But when we start talking about like the maybe really cool information, but maybe not very useful for treatment plans, those labs are not as necessary unless you have like some sort of like really crazy disease that you haven't found any answers, and maybe some of that test might elucidate something after you have tried everything and your sleep is perfect and your nutrition is perfect and your exercise, you're not overdoing it, and your mental health, and you have good community connections, and your lifestyle habits are on point, and your nutrition, you're pooping every day, and it's not floating, and you don't see any particles of food within your stool. And now then maybe we can start thinking about those higher level tests.
Yeah, and you're right. I think the simple blood test, the simple urine test, like there's a lot of value in those, and we get a lot of information out of them. I think more what I was referring to is that if we haven't even looked at the basic lab tests, then why are we doing a nutrient analysis on you to see how much corn is in your hair, or to see what your vitamin, B, whatever B6 status is? Unless, like you said, unless you've got an obscure disease, or you've done everything and you're literally not getting anywhere with your health, that sometimes I feel like we just search. I want more information. I want more information. And I used to coach a lot of triathletes, and I think like they were so data driven. They wanted stats on everything, but it's like you're still not even eating good quality nutrition. So who cares about this micro piece of information about your power output when you don't have a good pedal stroke, or you're not efficient in the water? Like it's coming down to the basics of, we have so much information that we do these obscure tests that we think, oh, I need to run this giant panel of tests, and each of them costs the person $500 because of the processing fees and how it gets handled. But we haven't focused on the fundamentals. We haven't even realized their blood sugar is out of whack, or they might have high blood pressure, and we haven't dealt with those basics and those essentials before we've moved on to that higher level testing. And
I 100% agree with that. And then on the flip side, medical conditions, and then being labeled with a medical condition, or having a diagnosis, and then sometimes people become the diagnosis. And I have a little story about a patient that I had. And this patient, tons of pain, so diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And we started doing a bunch of different treatments, deep tissue massage and acupuncture and all of these things, the really cool things. And every week you would see a little bit of progress. And then, the next week, they were happier. And then the next week, and then one week the patient comes in and I'm like, how are you doing this week? And awful. I'm doing so awful. My pain is back. I'm really reactive. I started smoking, and I'm like, what? So like there was like it. So I go to my my supervising doctor, anyway, and he says, well, you know what happened? They were getting better, and that diagnosis was leaving them, and they started losing their identity. So they
Yes.
self-sabotaged in order to grab onto that diagnosis. You are not your diagnosis. You are a person and you deserve to be healthy.
Yes, and you're not the diabetic, you're a person with diabetes, or you're not breast cancer, you happen to have breast cancer. It's exactly that. There's so much attachment. I see this a lot with chronic pain patients, is that I've gotten really good results with patients and had similar experiences like what you've said, is they were getting better, and then all of a sudden, but who am I without my pain? Who am I without this diagnosis? And then you see that regression, people going right back to where they were because they do self-sabotage because they don't know how to identify without that disease or that condition anymore.
And it's so sad, and that's where we need to be a strong front, and we need to have a system of medicine where we're not spending 5 minutes with our patients. We're spending, enough time to discover the underlying condition and give the best help to our patients as we can.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So Shawna, I could talk to you for 2 hours, but I think what time is it over there in Canada?
In Canada, in Canada, it's 7:30 p.m.
7:30 p.m. Okay, so it's not. I don't feel that bad, but
No.
you do have a book where you expand on these ideas of your 7 pillars. Can you tell my listeners about your journey through the book and where they can get it and all the cool stuff that you have been doing for the past year in preparation for the release of this book?
Yeah, so this book is a lot of years in the making, but the past year has really been the primary focus of it. So it's called Healthy by Choice: Your Blueprint for Vital Living, and it's basically about these 7 pillars, and it's a book to empower you to take charge of your health. So there is no one right diet. There is no one right exercise plan that works for everyone. And the focus of the book is essentially to give you the basic information. So I did 2 solid years of research to say, what do all diet plans have in common? What do all exercise plans have in common? What do, looking through all those components and really drilling down to the essentials. And I don't care what kind of an exercise plan you do. I don't care what kind of diet you have. If you want to be paleo, if you want to be vegan, if you want to be vegetarian, it doesn't really matter. But what matters is that you come down to the core essentials of what a healthy diet is, and what a healthy exercise plan is, and what your sleep should ideally look like. And so I took all this information, tons of research out there, and I distilled it down into plain language and the basics. And I used lots of case studies to illustrate points. I've actually had quite a few people come up to me and say, "Hey, is this me in the book?" It's like, well, no, but it could be, right? Because it's the stories are meant to be, we come in and we think, oh, I'm special and unique. And Rob Wolf talks about this a lot. I'm this special, unique snowflake. But really, it's the same stuff that we see over and over again. And your stuff isn't special and unique, and you're not a snowflake. I see this all the time, but people think that they have this unique situation. And so the book was meant to help people understand that you are not the only person that doesn't sleep good. You're not the only person that has digestive issues or that can't figure out how to exercise properly. We all deal with these struggles in different capacities. And maybe for me, my nutrition is really good, but maybe my exercise is not so good. And the idea behind it is to help give you this basic blueprint, the template of what do you need to be healthy in each of those 7 pillars? And how you want to fill in the blanks and how you want to do that is completely up to you. So I'm not telling you go out and run because that is the best exercise. I'm not telling you you have to live off of spinach for the rest of your life because that's the healthiest food. It's more about the fundamentals and looking at it from that bigger picture. So the book right now is available on Amazon. You can get it either the ebook version or the hard copy book if you'd like. You can also get that through my website, which is yourlifestylestrategy.com. And that's what it is. It's about your lifestyle and what is your strategy for success. And it's all about taking charge of your health, being proactive, being preventive, and using the fundamentals to outlay whatever it is that you want to get to in terms of your health. It's reaching for that idea of optimal health.
That sounds fantastic. And if someone wants to become your, wants to see you for consultation, how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so they can do that all through my website. So same website, yourlifestylestrategy.com. I do one-on-ones, and I'm moving to more group format as well. And I'm finding it gives a little bit more camaraderie, gives that support that you need for success. But some people really want that one-on-one approach, and I love doing one-on-ones. And so I've got the contact me page. I've got a little information about each of my programs and services there, and happy to help people that are really wanting to see some changes and those fundamentals of, okay, what do I need to do and how do I put those pieces in the right order? I find for some people is the biggest piece. We all have our idea. I'm eating pretty healthy or I'm exercising pretty good. Sometimes it's taking a step back and just looking at that broader perspective. And I just take this bigger global view. I kind of look down and be like, hey, what are all these moving parts and what's most out of balance? And then prioritizing it from there is, addressing what's most out of balance and then moving into what's more in balance. And it's a bit of a giant puzzle, but for me it's always about really how do I get you to make those changes on your own. I'm not always the expert. Sometimes you know more than what I do, and it's allowing the client to also have input. It's not just me telling you this is the way it is. It's very much a collaborative practice because it's a back and forth, and what works for one person doesn't always work for someone else, and so it's this constant communication back and forth of give this a try, or have you thought about this, and tell me what's working, what about that is working for you, what's not working for you. Let's get rid of what's not working and let's tweak it, and constantly changing things.
And any speaking presentations?
Ooh, so I have a couple that are in the works. I can't, nothing official that I can announce at this point, but always on the lookout for new conferences, new events. So I do have a bunch of stuff in the works, but it hasn't quite gotten to the point where I can announce that yet. Doing some book signings, which is super exciting, and doing a little bit more writing, and I'm already thinking about book number 2, which I can't believe that that I'm doing that. But
your husband's gonna kill you.
I know. He's like, "What are you doing?" Little did he know I tricked him.
Where can they find you on social media and Facebooks and the MySpaces?
Yeah, so I am on Facebook. If you search Shawna Curry, Your Lifestyle Strategy. On Instagram, I am Your Lifestyle Strategy. Twitter is Take Charge YYC because I'm in Calgary. And which one am I missing? Instagram is Your Lifestyle Strategy as well.
Cool. Shawna, it's so awesome to have this conversation with you, and I hope we're gonna be going to some of the same conferences. I'm sure.
I'm sure we'll run into each other somewhere.
Yeah, so we'll have more gluten-free fish and chips in the future.
I didn't have any of those.
Did you try? You did try the vegan ice cream.
I did do the vegan ice cream.
Oh my goodness, that mungu was delicious.
With the gluten-free cone.
Yeah, it was great. That was like highlights of HS. So, another thing about HS, you presented at the same time as me.
I know. I didn't get a chance to watch yours.
How crazy is that? So, yes. All the people went to your presentation. So I had 2 people in my presentation?
You did not have 2 people. You're lying. I think we were about an even break.
Yeah, well, let's call it a Canadian break.
Okay,
Canadian break.
I don't know what that is.
Me either. I just invented a new term.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so awesome. Hope to have, whenever you're ready to launch the second book, let's have you on the podcast and let all my listeners be the first ones on the scoop.
That sounds awesome.
Awesome. I talk to you soon, Shawna.
Okay, take care.
Bye bye.